It's time to eat.
What are you hungry for?
Sit down and get ready to consume an abundance of fantasy football knowledge from Ross Tucker and John Daigle.
Feed me now. I'm starving.
On the Fantasy Feast Eatin' podcast.
Yeah, let's eat, baby. This is the Fantasy Feast Eatin' podcast presented by DraftKings. It's the show that's so nice, we do it twice, each and every week during the NFL regular season, which means, yes, starting in the playoffs, we'll only do one episode every week. But during the regular season, we give you 2 episodes every week because we want to make sure you are ready for every game from a fantasy standpoint, from a prop betting standpoint, from a player information standpoint. The guy that provides all of that is my guy, John Daigle. He is fantastic. Check him out on social at NotJDaigle, or you can check him out over at EstablishTheRun.com, where he's one of the owners over there. Just make sure you use that code FEAST so you get the discount. Not too late to get that discount and get a pretty nice little Christmas gift there. I mentioned we're presented by DraftKings. You can check us out on YouTube, youtube.com/Ross Tucker NFL. I'm at Ross Tucker NFL on social. We are at Ross Tucker Pod. John, we got 8 more games to get to here in episode 2. We'll start with the Titans and the Jaguars.
This one could go either way. It could be a result similar to last week's Jacksonville Raiders game where it's 19-14. Perhaps, though, both defenses, like we saw the Titans against the Colts, also fall apart and we get a high-scoring affair. Regardless, there are only a couple players that we should be interested in the fantasy championship, and one is the backup running back for the Titans. Tony Pollard now over 1,000 yards for the season. Really good year. But we also saw in garbage time, it was Tajay Spears who came off the bench as the RB10 on the entire week and scoring 2 touchdowns, including 2 goal line runs. So given what we expect this game to be, I do think Spears is startable as an RB2 or 3, just because I expect the Titans to probably start leaning on him a little bit more now in their last 2 games. Also, it's the time of the year where everyone's trying to stream tight ends because they are just trying to pick the best starter off the waiver wire in case they didn't find a starter yet to this point. And I'll tell you, I think the best streamer at that position this week is Chig Okonkwo, because now the last 2 games, you saw it yourself, Ross, you called that game. Chig Okonkwo has 21 targets the past 2 weeks, has seemed to really find a rapport with Mason Rudolph in that time as well. So I do think everyone should stream Chig Okonkwo this week and this favorable matchup against a Jacksonville defense that has still allowed the most fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks, which elevates Rudolph and the passing game as a whole. For Jacksonville, too, it's really just become one player, if only because we cannot pick the weekly whack-a-mole between Tank Bigsby and Travis Etienne. Tank Bigsby's the one who scores a rushing touchdown here, but we've also seen them vary from time to time under Doug Peterson, where he just picks the hot hand. Very hard to predict for fantasy. For Brian Thomas, though, it has been very easy to predict because now in the last 2 weeks, the wide receiver 3 and wide receiver 4 in fantasy from Mac Jones, who the offense continues to struggle, but Brian Thomas now over 1,000 yards and 9 touchdowns in his rookie season. He continues to get better from Mac Jones weekly.
He has been fantastic. And you're right. Mason Rudolph, what he does is he gets rid of the ball pretty quickly, throws it the middle of the field. He feeds Okonkwo and Spears. Those are like his guys. He showed that second half against the Bengals. He showed that against the Colts as well. What about the Raiders and the Saints, John?
Let's start with the Saints. I don't know how you have any faith in any of them. We're also waiting out to see who's going to be available. Marquez Valdes-Scantling ruled out through an illness, was also reportedly going through a lung injury. We'll see what happens if he's available for this game. It takes a leap of faith, I know, but if you're going to start anyone from New Orleans' offense, I think you can still get to Kendry Miller in deeper leagues, 14-team options, just because these last 2 weeks against the Raiders without Max Crosby, they have allowed running backs to combine for 35 touches and 178 yards, and then last week against Jacksonville, 24 touches, 88 yards and a touchdown. That seems to favor Kendry Miller again, wherever you're desperate. For the Raiders, I'll just say, at least Aiden O'Connell's returned under center, put Brock Bowers back into our life. jumped right back up there with a 35% target share from AOC for 11 catches and 99 yards. Jacoby Myers offers a high floor, but hasn't really shown the ceiling with Aiden O'Connell, whereas that's what Bowers delivers. So as long as AOC is still starting for the Raiders, Brock Bowers is a very confident tight end one. For the backfield, a little bit trickier. We saw 3 separate running backs for Green Bay on Monday night score a rushing touchdown, so you would think we want to continue targeting running backs against the Saints. But the Raiders are using, as they showed last week, 2 separate individuals in place of Sincere McCormick. Both Amir Abdullah and Alexander Madison involved. And despite the fact that Madison had 4 more touches than Abdullah actually outgained him like 29 yards as the more efficient player. Finishes as the RB14 on the week. Alexander Madison comes in as the RB20. So you can flex either of them in 12-team leagues. They're both used in the passing game as well, but still less of confidence. I wish it would still instead revert to just one being used as opposed to both.
Next up, it's Carolina and Tampa Bay. I'm expecting some points in this one and a fun matchup.
A game that's total continues to increase, and that makes sense. Let's start with the Bucs side of the ball, because we know, although Baker Mayfield struggled against that Dallas defense that, hats off to Dallas, eliminated just an hour before kickoff, and their defense at least showed up. Some of the hardest hits I've seen on tape all year long against this Bucs offense and Baker Mayfield. But the Panthers defense is not that. The Panthers defense is still dead last in creating pressure this year, and Baker Mayfield leads the league with 32 touchdowns from a clean pocket. I expect Mike Evans and Jalen McMillan, who now in his last 3 games, 25, 23, 16% of the Bucs targets with a touchdown in all 3 games. I expect both of them to continue leading the way from Baker Mayfield through the air. I also, for as much confidence as I have in the Bucs passing game, I have as much confidence in Bucky Irving and this backfield. The last 2 weeks, including this past game, that Bucky Irving has logged at least 1 full practice through his ankle and rib injuries that he's going through, back and hip as well. He's out-touched Rachaad White 28-12, and then on Sunday night, 19-10 in those 2 contests. So as long as Bucky Irving is at full strength, I know Todd Bowles had to answer questions from the media about why Bucky Irving was not used really in the 4th quarter at all. And Rachaad White's the one who unfortunately fumbles on the game's last possession that sealed the win for Dallas. I expect Bucky Irving to come back out and get a full helping of 20-plus touches here. So absolutely love him against this miserable Panthers run defense. And I expect this one to be high scoring, as you said, because it's what Bryce Young and the passing offense is also providing. Chuba Hubbard, of course, gets every single touch yet again, explodes in overtime, sealing the win with 2 touchdowns in that game against the Cardinals. But also it's what Bryce Young is doing on the ground too, because now in his last 6 starts, Bryce Young, similar to Drake May, is quietly averaging 5.9 weekly rushing points with at least 20 yards and/or rushing touchdowns in those 6 starts. We saw Cooper Rush on Sunday night average 8.3 yards per attempt against this injury-riddled Bucs secondary. So there is some faith that Bryce Young can get it done both on the ground and through the air in a high-scoring affair.
What about the Eagles and the Cowboys? This will be a juicy matchup. I'm a little surprised the Eagles are favored by as much as they are, given how the Cowboys have won 4 out of their last 5. We don't know as of Tuesday morning when we're recording this whether or not Jalen Hurts will be available in this game.
And that's the biggest key here. Saquon Barkley looked amazing, but you still need a functional quarterback under center. And Kenny Pickett proved he is still not that. Comes off the bench, 3 sacks, 2 turnovers. And if he's the one under center for Jalen Hurts, Micah Parsons and this Cowboys defense is going to eat him up. They're going, because through all their flaws, the Cowboys have still had no issues all year long generating pressure. And that's when Kenny Pickett crumbles. So I would pick up the Cowboys defense in the fantasy championship and start them if it is Pickett under center. We've also seen that without Dallas Goedert, there's really no other answer outside of A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith through the air. Even last week, Brown and Smith combined for 23 of Philadelphia's 25 targets. That's where the ball goes, to those two players in particular. So we'll see for Jalen Hurts. Definitely starting him, obviously, if he's playing. Otherwise, you have to look elsewhere. I would not start Kenny Pickett in fantasy. And for the Cowboys, it's as you said, it's a team that continues showing up and playing under Mike McCarthy, so much so that I believe McCarthy's probably looking at an extension after the year, since the team is still, again, showing up and playing hard for him. Also, Cooper Rush continues to get it done. We just talked about him, his strong performance against the Bucs secondary. The Eagles defense, this is not the same matchup. It's still one we respect and really only want to start CeeDee Lamb against. But I will say at least we know, outside of the goal line carry Ezekiel Elliott received, vultured for that 1-yard touchdown over Rico Dowdle. Dowdle otherwise handles every other touch for that backfield and is still someone, although it's a tough matchup, we want to start in the fantasy championship. If only because it may be a favorable game script if it is picking under center.
That's a good point. All right, we'll keep it moving. The Dolphins and the Browns. I think we'll get DTR again here in this one, John, and I don't think it's going to be that cold, but it'll be cold. Will the Dolphins be fish out of water, which is so lame and people say it all the time, but whatever.
And this was actually a factor in fantasy drafts around August, too, is that Tua has performed poorly in cold weather. But remember also, we had a freezing game earlier this year, around 30 degrees, that he played, and he played great. So not too worried about the Dolphins.
What game was that? Buffalo.
I believe, yeah, that was Buffalo game was week 2. Did they play in Lambeau? Was that the cold one?
No, at Buffalo. When he played at Buffalo, he played well.
That's true. Yes, that's the one. Played really well in that game. And so he somewhat nixed those rumors. Also remember, last year, the game that everyone cites when he played poorly in cold weather, it was not only like the frozen tundra of Kansas City, it was also against a Chiefs defense that was literally the best in the league at the time. So not fair to say he just, blanket statement, he can't play in cold weather. Also, it's because of what this Browns defense and offense have become. A predictable, unexplosive offense from Dorian Thompson-Robinson, who has a knee injury. We'll see if he starts. David Njoku also got an MRI on Monday for his own knee injury. We'll see if he plays. We saw with Dorian Thompson-Robinson under center, you just have little confidence, if any, in starting any of Jerry Jeudy or Elijah Moore, regardless of Cedric Tillman's availability. So hard to have a vote of confidence for any Browns player, minus Jerome Ford, who even with the Browns offense struggling altogether, Jerome Ford gets 16 touches and goes for 131 yards and a touchdown in place of Nick Chubb. So yes, you can still start Jerome Ford for Cleveland. On the other side is where it gets interesting because the Dolphins also, like the Bengals we talked about in episode 1, are fighting for their playoff life. They're very alive still. They have to win out and get some help. And because of that, everyone is still going to continue playing. Maybe we even get Jalen Waddle back in this game. But regardless, we saw Devon Achane finally explode for Miami. Should have slid on his last 50-yard touchdown run that I know helped fantasy players get to their championship. If they had slid, they immediately win the game. The 49ers don't even get a chance to drive the field.
Oh, my gosh. And I would have won my teaser bet on the Even Money Betting podcast. He didn't need that touchdown.
No.
Achane, that cost me a lot of units on the Even Money Betting podcast. Brutal. I didn't, I just saw the highlight. I didn't realize that was the situation.
Yeah,
how much time was left?
No, if he slides, the 49ers don't have enough timeouts to cover it. Like the Dolphins literally win if he slides right then and there. Instead, he goes in and scores. And he has the biggest grin on his face too. He saw that end zone from a mile away and was never going down. So,
funny.
It ruins your bet. But it helped other fantasy players definitely make their championship because he ends up going for 190 total yards and a touchdown from scrimmage. We see him also tie for the team high in target share with Tyreek Hill at 22.5% without Jalen Waddle. So, again, those are the two players that I think the Dolphins continue to lean into whether Waddle starts or not, is Achane and Tyreek Hill. And Jonnu Smith, it's a much easier matchup, I will say as well. Like we know know Fred Warner and that Niners defense, for all the struggles they've had this year, they hadn't allowed a single tight end to go over 70 yards in any game. So we did not predict a ceiling outcome for Jonnu Smith. But this one, much easier against the Browns linebacker room.
Packers, Vikings, pretty clearly, I think, the game of the day, the game of the weekend, really, in the NFL. Such an awesome game, especially with the way both these teams are playing. Yes, I will be drinking some Labatt Blue Lights with friends and family, watching this game, living life to the power of we. Always enjoy responsibly beer. Labatt USA, Buffalo, New York.
The last time these two teams played in Week 4, they combined for 60 points. And despite what the Packers have become in 6 games out of their bye, as a run-first team that leads into Josh Jacobs, you can't do that against the Vikings, first of all, and the Packers can't win doing that in this game. The Vikings are still second in yards per carry, 3.8 allowed to opposing running backs, and fourth in making contact, just 1.4 yards after a handoff, which, equates to leaving zero breathing room for running backs the moment they touch the ball. The Packers have to throw in this game. And it's not as if Jordan Love has been bad. That's why they've been leaning to Josh Jacobs. They've just had success in very positive game scripts doing so. Because in 6 games out of the bye, Jordan Love has been awesome. 9.2 yards per attempt, 9 touchdowns, 1 interception. This is not going away from Love just because, he's performed poorly. They've just had success running the ball. But if we don't think the Packers can do that successfully in this game, then Jordan Love has to get it done in a high-scoring affair. And if that's the case, since Christian Watson suffered his knee injury on Monday night, is undergoing an MRI, does not seem likely to play in this game, then you can go back to Jaden Reed, Romeo Doubs, and Dontavian Wicks and the Packers' 3 wide sets. Dontavian Wicks, I know we've been here before, and he's let everyone down in fantasy. But again, in those 2 starts he made for Christian Watson earlier this year, he saw 24% and 28% of the team's targets. He's going to be out there as an every down player. So I still love starting all 3 of them with Jordan Love in this game. And for the Vikings, similar to how condensed the Phillies offense has become, it's the same way with Minnesota, where, yes, T.J. Hawkinson provides an outlet underneath and in the intermediate level of the field, but this is all Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson, who the touchdown regression has finally come for over the last few games, including 140 and 2 TDs this past week. Jair Alexander, his return would be something we would talk about and maybe be a little bit worried about, but there's something weird going on there. Practice in full now for 2 consecutive games and still gets ruled out on Monday night. And apparently, there may be something more going on behind the scenes that we're not aware of, so it doesn't seem like Jair Alexander will be back for this game to perhaps stop Justin Jefferson either.
All right, so what do you mean? What's going on here?
I don't know. Alexander has now practiced in full in consecutive weeks and yet has still been ruled out. And there was a report that came out before the game Monday when he was ruled out that maybe he was getting either a second opinion or getting his knee looked into further. So I honestly don't know what's happening behind the scenes, especially because his return is obviously important for a team we think can be a Super Bowl contender because the Packers defense has been playing so well.
What's weird, too, to me about that and about him is this isn't the first time there's been, weird stuff with him. Was it last year or 2 years ago where there was weird stuff?
Yes, I believe so. And he's someone who has historically missed a lot of games going through injuries for Green Bay as well. So I don't know. And remember, that because you can't stay on the field for the Packers, that's why they cut Aaron Jones last year. Aaron Jones rushed for over 100 yards in 5 consecutive games. He basically now has his own zip code in Dallas. He performed so well against the Cowboys, and yet they still cut him just because he can't stay healthy. It's not an organization that treats that kind of rehab kindly.
All right, what about Sunday night, which I'm looking forward to quite a bit? Michael Penix Jr. and the Falcons against the Commanders. What did we learn from Michael Penix Jr.'s first start, John?
I think he did exactly what the organization asked of him. 0 sacks on 9 pressures, whereas Kirk Cousins had not proven to be elusive this year, and more importantly, able to push the ball downfield. Penix went 5 of 8 for 11.3 yards per attempt on throws 10 yards downfield. His only interception is entirely Kyle Pitts' fault, who tipped a perfect pass that otherwise would have been a touchdown into the defense's hands in the end zone against the Giants. This is also, if we're expecting Penix to continue having success throwing downfield, this is also a Commanders defense that has allowed the 9th most completions, 20 yards downfield, including a league-high 10 touchdowns on those throws. So I do think we finally have an offense across from Jaden Daniels who can push back and provide a lot of points on Sunday Night Football. I wish it were easier to predict who the ball is going to go to from Jaden Daniels, but as we saw, you get open, and Jaden Daniels is so good, he finds you. Including Jamison Crowder ran the 5th most routes among Washington's receivers, still scores 2 touchdowns, including that pinpoint throw Daniels weaved through the middle of the field for the game-winning touchdown last week. So, yes, I do think the Falcons, including Darnell Mooney, can have success here. I will say we are waiting on Drake London's hamstring injury that he suffered last week, though. Led the team with 8 targets, left. There was a report afterwards where Raheem Morris came out and said that if it were a playoff game, London could have returned. And now, since the Bucs lost, I believe the Falcons not only hold the tiebreaker, they control their own destiny. So this practically is a playoff game for the Falcons. It's very important to have everyone on the field here.
When you say the Falcons, I'm curious who you think Penix is going to get the ball to.
I think the preferred target downfield is still Darnell Mooney. But again, it was London who, before his hamstring injury, led them in 8 targets. I think those are his 2 favorite receivers, though. Bijan Robinson, we still saw him score 2 touchdowns from 2 and 4 yards out. You're never worried about the matchup for Bijan Robinson, although the Commanders' run defense has struggled this year. But that's what I'm most excited about, is that I do think Penix can be streamed in Fantasy Championship just because I'm expecting points from both sides of the ball here.
We got an awesome week to drink some Smirnoff cocktails and enjoy football. How about Christmas Eve? Christmas, we got 2 games, including the game I'm calling. Thursday night, Saturday, Sunday. Guess what? Smirnoff and the NFL are with you every step of the way. Smirnoff is the world's #1 vodka. Plus, they are an official vodka partner of the NFL this holiday season. When you're enjoying the game and your cocktails, please make sure to drink responsibly. Take a minute, make a plan, never drive impaired. Please drink responsibly. Smirnoff number 21 vodka, distilled from grain, 40% alcohol by volume. The Smirnoff Company, New York, New York. Please do not share with anyone under legal drinking age. Smirnoff, we do game days. Okay, last but not least, Monday Night Football. The Lions offense still doing Lions offense things. Against the Niners offense that I guess we got Deebo Samuel going at least, John.
We did, and that's what we should have expected with Patrick Taylor, the team's 4th-string running back, is for the biggest beneficiary to be not the running back, not Patrick Taylor, but the team's passing game, because they probably then lack confidence to run the ball. And I think that's why we got a season-high 40 pass attempts from Brock Purdy in that game. And even Deebo Samuel comes back into our lives with 5+ carries. So, yes, Deebo Samuel, assuming Isaac Guerendo cannot turn around, he was limited in practice. He's going to open the week, I heard, limited in practice. So we'll see if he can play Monday. And if so, remember, Guerendo did outtouch Patrick Taylor 37-1 in his 2 games he was available for Christian McCaffrey. So I would imagine Guerendo is startable as an RB2, RB3 for fantasy if he's the one starting over Patrick Taylor on Monday night. Otherwise, it is this passing game you can continue leaning into from Purdy, Deebo, and George Kittle and Jawan Jennings. On the year, and that's what's fun about this game, on the year, Detroit historically had come in with the 6th best red zone defense. But because all these injuries are finally adding up, in their last 3 games, they've dropped all the way to allowing a touchdown on 67% of the red zone possessions against them. And as we know, that's what the 49ers have struggled with all year long, is scoring when the field becomes condensed. And that includes this last week against the Dolphins, 2 of 5 in red zone opportunities, scoring a touchdown, including missing a field goal. So if the Lions defense is now falling apart in that area of the field, then we can have faith in Brock Purdy and the passing offense here. Also a fun litmus test for Jared Goff, because remember, this in the conference championship, the last time these two teams played, whenever the Niners pressured Goff, he went 3 of 13 for 2 yards per attempt and 2 sacks. From a clean pocket, though, when Nick Bosa and them couldn't get to him, 22 of 28 for 8.8 yards per attempt and 1 touchdown. With Nick Bosa back the past couple of weeks, even a couple weeks ago, we saw him pressure Matthew Stafford on 45% of his dropbacks. So this game, to me, is just like a test for Jared Goff and the Lions' passing offense to say, okay, Goff, if you're under pressure, what can you truly do? Because these things are going to matter as the Lions make their run for the Super Bowl.
Love it. Love the show. Love working with you, John. Next week will be our last week with 2 episodes. Follow this man on social media. He's got some funny posts, too. I enjoy John's humor. At @NotJDaigle on social media. I'm at Ross Tucker NFL. We're at Ross Tucker Pod. I actually think we're not releasing this till Wednesday, so maybe it's too late for Christmas, but EstablishTheRun.com, that's a pretty cool gift to give someone as well. Just make sure you use the code FEAST for that discount. Other than that, I'm stuffed. We're done. Merry Christmas, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to Fantasy Feast. Make sure to also check out the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, Even Money, and College Draft, all on the DraftKings Network, YouTube, or subscribe to the podcasts on your favorite platform.